Test, test, test. Oh, good. Okay, I'm live. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I hope that you're doing well. This is Achyuta Bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Today, I'm going to be talking about Jupiter's entrance into the sign of Pisces, and I'm also going to be doing some live Q&A. I wasn't sure that I was on live at first, so sorry if you guys were sitting there for a while. Where are you all coming from? I'd like to hear in the chat box. I always love to hear some roll call. I see California, Colorado, UK, Italy, North Carolina, Colorado. Awesome. Awesome. Keep it coming. I love hearing where you guys are coming from. Canada. Nice to see you guys. I'm happy to be here today. And what we're going to do, my agenda for the day is to talk about the entrance of Jupiter into Pisces for a little bit. And then as promised, I'm doing a Q&A session. It's kind of like not my usual Q&A. Usually my Q&A revolves around astrology, but today I'm doing more of a personal Q&A because throughout the year, I usually get, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 questions a month from people that are really personal. And I usually just sort of pass on answering them. And I decided it might make for a fun episode to aggregate some of the questions and, share some of myself a little bit more with you guys so that you know me a little bit better. So I have a really fun list of questions. If you have other questions for me, you can put them in the box, in the chat box. If there's anything you want to know about me, I'm happy to share. And you guys came up with really creative questions too. For example, how would your best friend describe your personality? Do you get in trouble for your sense of humor? How did you meet your wife? Like all sorts of really fun things. I was like, some of them I was like, pass, not answering that one. but some of them are really fun. So we'll do that at the end. Before I dive into Jupiter in the sign of Pisces, we're going to talk about Jupiter's dignity placement in Pisces. And I'm standing up because I'm sick of sitting. I just did a really long interview and I just can't, my butt hurts because the bench I have is just really dramatic. It's like really hard wood and I've got wood butt right now. So I'm not going to sit down. So sorry. I hope the audio sounds okay. Anyway, one of the things that we're going to take a look at the dignity of Jupiter in Pisces in particular and what that might mean. And then we'll jump into, I'll do some of that Q&A at the end. I want to remind everybody that my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts in June. So you can check it out on my website. I'll actually bring it up right now so that you guys can see it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my website. So if you are on my website, nightlightastrology.com, there's a book a reading tab, there's courses tab. You're going to go to the courses tab, go to the first year course and click on it. And it'll take you to my first year astrology certification course. Now, this program starts in June. The next class starts on June 13th. We meet every week on Sundays, and typically it's 3 weeks on and 1 week off. They're 2 to 3 hour classes each. They're webinars. I have people from all over the world to take the classes, and some people are attending live, and a good amount of people are also participating remotely, which means that you're going to be watching the recordings of the webinars on your own time. And there's a 2-year gap in terms of when you start the program and when you finish it for taking the certification exam. So you people can sign up for this course and essentially take 2 full years to complete it on their own remotely if they want, as a kind of correspondence course with all the recordings. I don't recommend that. If you can attend live, I think that's optimal. And when you're in the class, there's a lot of things that are there to support you. One, there's it's a very structured, guided course in ancient astrology. There are breakout study sessions in between modules led by some of my best teaching staff. I lead all of the classes other than the breakout study sessions where they're basically there for tutoring. After every unit we get through, then there's like a tutoring session and anyone can come to that and ask questions. We have bonus quizzes, optional reading assignments for everything we do throughout the year, tons of bonus video content. There's a group forum discussion. You can email me throughout the year with questions. It's a great program. The last 10 classes, I bring in live clients, I read for them, and then break down the session and basically show you how to use the techniques that you're studying to craft an hour-long reading for someone, which is about standard length of reading. People take it personally. They take it for, professional reasons. Like, I want to become an astrologer, or I just love astrology and it's a pastime I want to develop more of in my spare time. So if you have any questions about it, feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com. You can ask any questions that you have. You can also, there's a lot of information on the website. The early bird payment, you save $500 off if you sign up before the class starts. There's a 12-month payment plan, and there's also need-based tuition. I really appreciate you guys, by the way. I just want to say that, for me, the ability to take a little bit of time leading up to my programs to, push my course every day. I know that, for some people it's annoying. It's like, okay, he's going to talk about his classes again. And he does it every day. But this is a primary way that I earn my living, is to take 2 minutes at the beginning of every video and just promote my courses. So I really appreciate you guys for just being patient with that. And hope that some of you who are interested will come check it out. In the meantime, let's bring up the astrology of the day. I'm going to bring up the real-time clock, and we're going to talk about Jupiter and Pisces now. So here's the real-time clock, and Jupiter is just about to enter the sign of Pisces. You can see Jupiter right here at the tail end of Aquarius. And what's going to happen is on the 13th and into the 14th of this month, here's Jupiter. You're going to see there's 2958 on the 13th. Let's move it forward a few hours. So it'll be, what is it going to be? Probably, yeah, it's around like 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening on May 13th. There, you can see it. There's Jupiter having moved into the sign of Pisces. So, we're like a week away. Now, I'm going to go through Jupiter in all 12 houses next week. I've already done it once, but I'm going to do it again, just to give people a sense of what might occur as Jupiter changes signs. That's really important, because when Jupiter changes signs, it changes whole sign houses. The topics activated when Jupiter enters a new house in your life are going to be pretty profound, especially because Jupiter is really well dignified in Pisces and is going to bring more of the preferable, like awesome Jupiter stuff. Certainly, there's no, it depends on every birth chart, of course, but in which house. But this is a good Jupiter. This is a Jupiter that's moving back into its home domicile after consecutive sojourns through Saturn's signs. And Saturn, when Jupiter is in Saturn's sign, it's a very different Jupiter. Like you can't underestimate how different it's going to feel when Jupiter is back into its own home domicile. So I want to talk a little bit about that today and what those differences might look like by looking at the dignity of Jupiter in particular, or excuse me, what I should say is looking at the dignity signature of Pisces. So what does that mean? Well, in every sign of the zodiac, planets behave and act very differently. So for example, Pisces is a double-bodied water sign that's at the end of winter and on the cusp of spring. And that for that reason, there are a variety of planets that act and behave in different ways in this sign. This is the sign of hope. This is the sign of rebirth, because we're at the end of winter and on the cusp of spring. So it's an aspirational sign that's moving out of darkness and into light. And this is Jupiter's feminine domicile. The feminine in ancient astrology, metaphysically, philosophically, not in terms of like gender or sex, but like yin would be in the I Ching or in Eastern philosophy. The feminine is always moving toward but never reaching. In the same way that our material lives move toward ideals but never fully reach them. In fact, we all die someday. And so the nature of the material world is to move toward the object of desire, but to only experience the results of our desires in a temporary fashion, in a fleeting, impermanent way. And that is in Pisces represented by the light, the the light that's coming that has not yet been reached, the ideal toward which we're moving from winter towards spring, but we have not yet tasted. This is an archetypal domain of human experience, and that's why it's considered to be this double-bodied feminine sign. It's the exaltation of Venus, and the goddess. One of the things that defines the feminine and the goddess in the ancient philosophy is that the goddess is, always moving toward the object of its desire, and is also the object of desire itself. So there's this, that's a really funny thing. If you think about that, if you really sit and think about that you think of Venus and Pisces, for example, you think of a planet that represents the object of desire toward which we are moving, but it also represents the object of desire itself. So Venus is the thing that is desired, as well as the state of desiring something that that Venus does not have. This is one of the reasons why Venus is such a difficult character for to be married, right? Like she can't be married to like anyone, because it would cause this reckless, chaotic, totally violent struggle with all the other gods out of envy and possessiveness and lust and so forth. So it's like, well, you can't really marry Venus to anyone, because if Venus is possessed by anyone, it causes war. So Venus can't really be possessed. The goddess can't be possessed. Venus is also herself, as a goddess, always desiring things with which can't be possessed. For example, she's married to Hephaestus, or always mispronounce his name, but wants Mars. She wants Ares. She wants that which she can't have. So just as much as we want Venus but can't have her, Venus wants things that she can't have as well. So it's like a perfect little Venusian mind puzzle to think about that. Now, this is part of why Venus is exalted in Pisces, because we're talking about a time of year where we're moving toward but cannot have the light. And that exact state is the reward. Like that state is, if we can relish that state, then we've understood something very profound about happiness. So on the other hand, if we don't understand that state, a placement like Venus and Pisces will tear us apart. We will feel frustrated by not being able to possess or have or fully consummate some divine discontent. And that's when you see people getting into things like drugs, escape, anything that's an escape, an attempt to have that which can't be had, or an angst about not being able to have something that turns destructive. And so Venus is exalted in Pisces, and people will say, well, that must mean something really good for Venus. Well, it does, if you're able to hold the tension of desiring and longing but not consummating. That's why Venus is so profoundly romantic and powerful in Pisces, is that it's that exalted state of the goddess where it's so beautiful, it's so attractive, but it's like a foreplay that won't climax. And that's something of Pisces is like that. And this will either be a source of, gentle, contented, patient, blissful Venusian energy, or in which is very delicate and compassionate and sensitive and sweet and romantic and so forth, or and sensible, or it's going to be a source of discontent. And then again, you have like, it gets really Shakespearean, it gets tragic, it gets dark, it gets addictive, and stuff like that. So you have to understand that Pisces is not just, when Jupiter moves into Pisces, sure, it's one of Jupiter's home domiciles, but Jupiter's also moving into the territory of these exalted, and complex Venusian dynamics. Okay, so you if you can kind of grok that Venusian vibe of Pisces, that's an archetypal experience. In this human world, we can either alchemize that and spiritualize that, or get torn apart by it. And most of us get torn apart by it if we're honest. We get torn apart by longing for things that we can't have, coming up with really poor coping mechanisms, having totally unrealistic expectations about what's possible, being really frustrated when we we consume the object of our desire, are satiated, and then disappointed, or feel betrayed or upset that it goes away or that it doesn't last. Like in all of that that can be the madness, the sort of Dionysian dismemberment of Venus and Pisces. And most of us like struggle through life like that. It's like, well, if I get this thing, if I have this, if I have that, if I get this relationship, whatever, then I'll be happy. And then we get all that stuff, or we get part of it. We struggle to get it, and then it's painful. It's not what we expected, and we're still in love with the next image. And this is kind of soap opera of our lives, right? And that can be Venus and Pisces. That's Piscean territory. On the other hand, in Bhakti, in Sufism, and even in Buddhism in different ways, there are so many teachings about how to relish that emotional sense of desire. There was a study that was done. I watched this. I read something a while ago. There was a study that was done. I'm trying to remember where it was from, and I'm going to be one of those people who's like, there was a study, and okay, so I don't remember where it was from. I'm sorry, but the study said that one of the reasons that men and women have that decreased sexual encounters with one another in monogamous relationships over time was because in the beginning, men were more game for foreplay. And as time went on, men developed less taste and interest in foreplay. Whereas, and the part of the study was to suggest that that the health and longevity of relationships depended upon men having to more unnaturally focus on or force themselves to develop a taste for foreplay. And not just one kind of foreplay, but many kinds of foreplay: emotional foreplay, linguistic foreplay, foreplay, like, for example, building up to a sexual encounter over several days through flirtation, all sorts of different kinds of foreplay that if men were able to develop a taste for, that the health, the sexual health of the relationship was much more likely to last. And I just thought that was so it was so fascinating because, essentially, if you're now translate this back to Venus and Pisces, the exaltation of Venus and Pisces. If you're not able to develop a taste for the foreplay of life, let's call it a cosmic foreplay, a soul foreplay. If you're not able to develop a taste for the way in which the pleasures of life tease and flirt their way into our hearts, that the best climaxes in life are pale in comparison to the foreplay that leads up to them. And if you can develop a sense of that existentially, that you're more likely to be happy spiritually, and you're more likely to evolve spiritually. And that is essentially what a good Venus in Pisces looks like. Or that's what the good sort of Venusian dimension of Pisces looks like. Otherwise, the alternative is this kind of dismemberment, the being torn apart by desires and frustration, and grass is greener on the other side, and you know what I mean? So now, so I just wanted to just like, Jupiter's moving into Pisces, and it might feel like, let's talk about Jupiter. But no, let's also talk about Jupiter is moving into the double-bodied feminine water sign of the fishes, exaltation of Venus. Get that feeling for it, because Jupiter acts and behaves very differently in its feminine domicile, the exaltation of Venus, this double-bodied water sign on the cusp of spring where the light is growing. It's totally different in that sign than in any other sign. So traditional astrologers will often be like, Jupiter is moving into its own domicile. It gains dignity. It gains strength. Good Jupiterian things will come. And like, yeah, that's true. But the dignities are there to, help us understand the archetypal and mythic texture of the planet as well. So what does a feminine Jupiter look like? Well, it's going to look and feel like an exalted Venus in many ways. It's going to amplify those qualities. On the other hand, we have to recognize that the sign of Pisces is also the sign of Mercury's fall and detriment. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, Mercury and Venus were said to be archetypal opposites for a few reasons. One of them is that the intellectual or rational is contrary to the sensual. They don't have to be, but they have a tendency to be. Anything can mingle and mix. You can see people who are very sensual and intellectual at the exact same time. But generally speaking, there's a difference between, mechanical engineering and interior designing, or mechanical engineering and let's maybe use a better example of, if you want to sit and think and talk about calculus, it's a different conversation than, someone sitting down and, playing jazz music on a piano. Right. So my point is that Mercury and Venus have a tense relationship with one another insofar as we have to work out the balance between the mental and the rational, and the romantic and the sensual. That there's a tension between those. No one's going to deny that. Like if I go down for dinner and I just start talking about all of the technical aspects of an astrology reading that I just did, my wife very literally will set down her fork and she'll look at me and she'll be like, dinner. You know what I mean? So it's like I have to, and it's good for me to have that reminder too, because, as an astrologer, it's really easy. Astrology was said to be invented by Hermes, Mercury. So it's this crazy, coded matrix of associative symbolic language that's used in all of these technical philosophical ways to delineate fate and karma. And there's Mercury in astrology. But if Mercury in delivering astrology, if we fail to be mythic, if we fail to be poetic, archetypal, suggestive, subtle, if we fail to read the emotional reality of a client, if we don't have good bedside manner, if there's not a touch of grace and sensuality to the way that we read and describe the symbols, then they're dead. They're not life-giving in that way. So there's always a tension between Mercury and Venus, and it's built into the structure of the zodiac. That's the point. So what we're also saying when Jupiter moves into the sign of Pisces is that we're going to be dealing with a Jupiter that's flying high on Venusian things, will potentially to the diminishment or detriment of mercurial things. So what would that look like? Well, that would mean that we might tend to, it might be a nice needed vacation from mental and rational, cold, distant, objective Saturnine stuff. Saturn in Aquarius tends to be more mental, more rational, more objective, and more distant. Funny that it's called an egalitarian sign, right? Because most of the time, Aquarius as a sign, and I love Aquarius, I have Aquarian family members, so I'm not trying to hate on the sign, but it's funny how people, will think of Aquarius as the most egalitarian sign, the one that wants equality for all and this kind of elevated sense of community and things like that. And yet, Saturn, generally speaking, is more cold, detached, objective, and rational. And it's funny how cold, detached, objective, non-human, non-relational, you will find people who are the most dogmatic about equality, peace, community, and so forth. So you always have to be careful of that. I'm not saying I'm anti-community either, or anti, equality or rights or freedom, but all like progressive liberal values, right? Which I grew up in a progressive liberal family, but of Aquarians, right? But all progressive liberal values, if not embodied, if not coming in, if they don't pass the eye test, if they don't pass the heart test, if they don't pass the emotional test, then they too can be nothing more than, high, lofty, but very rational and objectifying standards. And they can be very merciless, actually. So that's something we have to be aware of. As Jupiter is transitioning from Aquarius into Pisces, we're going to get, I think, a needed injection of emotional, sensitive, empathetic, feeling-oriented qualities that will come in and sort of assert themselves a little bit more. What does that look like? Well, remember, Jupiter is Jupiter is the god of like religion, education, basically anything that provides order, structure, and unity on a larger level. Of course, it's going to be individual too, but your institutions of law, your institutions of education, religion, government, anything that tries to provide a larger sense of societal or social unity, togetherness, orderliness, etc. That's Jupiter. People, sorry, I keep doing this. People commonly think of Saturn as like the lawgiver. It's like, no, that's not it. It's Jupiter, 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 Jupiter. Jupiter is the cosmocrat. He was the king of the gods and the one who provided that sense of cosmic cohesion to the Greek pantheon. And Saturn is representative of that which is decaying, or that which is dead, or that which is old, or that which is distant, or remote, or contemplative, or vast. Saturn is much more Neptunian in a sense. I've done many talks about this before, but it's important to understand that distinction, because when Jupiter has been in Saturn's sign for several years, a lot of what we've been dealing with has been the breakdown, evaluation, reformation, revisioning of, or conversation about the ordering structures of society and their decay and their death and the need for reform or their breakdown. We've been dealing with themes of the old versus the new, but they've been very objective and very very much about they're been much more mental and rational is the point. Now, when Jupiter enters Pisces, you have the same need for unity, order, togetherness, but now it's being infused with the sensual, Venusian, feminine, watery dimensions of Pisces. And this is great because what it does is it starts helping us to bring back the spirit of these institutions in our lives. And that could be very personal too. It doesn't have to be collective. What does a personal institution look like in your life? Well, it's those practices, traditions, beliefs that grant some sense of unity to your life. What do you do and what do you believe that holds your life together with some greater sense of unity with the cosmos or reality? Do you, for some people, it's going to be working out. It's going to be the way that they raise their kids. It's going to be the job that they're doing and what motivates them to do it. It's going to be how they take care of themselves. I mean, all of us have a little religion in us. You can't be a neutral participant in reality. Everyone's got some skin in the game. So what does your skin in the game look like, and what kind of bets have you placed as to the meaning of your life, the reason that you're here, and how you're going to participate, and how is that all how do you hold that all together with a set of values, beliefs, assertions, practices? That's Jupiter in your chart. Now, when Jupiter transitions into Pisces, we're going from 2 signs in a row where Jupiter's been evaluating things. With Jupiter-Saturn contact that we had, the great conjunction of Jupiter-Saturn in Aquarius, Jupiter in its fall in Capricorn with Pluto and Saturn, those have been phases of breakdown, decay, evaluation, reformation, disappointment, questioning. They've really, Jupiter-Saturn almost always has to do with the breakdown and then the rebuilding or reforming. And it's a very objective mental type of process. And you can see that, for example, when you look at, what happened with Jupiter in Capricorn and COVID-19 and everything, everything is happening around the world, the elections, the political dramas, blah, blah, blah. And then Jupiter into Aquarius, when they conjoin, there's usually this desire for reformation, recreation, restructuring, reordering. And you will see that in the mythology as well. Of course, Kronos, Saturn, is overthrown by his son Zeus, who comes in as a reformer and as the next order. So the Jupiter-Saturn is a lot, but again, you can't do all of that kind of reformation, reconsidering and evaluating of the structures of your life or of society or whatever without a very kind of mental, rational process on board when you're in the sign of Aquarius in particular. So it's been very ideological. It's been very much about ideological, intellectual combativeness, restructuring, trying to kill off the ideologies that we don't like, assert the ones that we do like. And that's been happening both personally and collectively. Now, again, all of that shifts when you get into Pisces. All of that shifts when you get into Pisces. When Jupiter moves into Pisces, now it's again that it's in the detriment of Mercury. So it's saying, look, I don't care what you're saying, I care how it feels. I don't care what you believe, I care about whether it passes the eye test. And by the eye test, we mean, the eyes are the windows of the soul. Does it feel right to me? Does it, and do you feel like if a teacher's in your life and a teacher is trying to help you learn something, or maybe a spiritual teacher or something, does the teacher speak to your heart? Do they move you emotionally? That's Jupiter and Pisces concern far more than, is it rational? Do you see my point? Do you see why this doesn't work and why this other thing should work? This is the problem. I've diagnosed, I've diagnosed it. So Jupiter and Pisces is, are you inspired? Do you have faith emotionally in what you're doing with your life? Does it pass the sincerity of heart, mind, and soul test? And that's like, frankly, I think that we really need that. I think that it's really easy, ironically, for there to be a total lack of emotional civility when you have Jupiter going through Saturn signs. We're so sure about what's working or what's not working, about the past versus where the future needs to go, and all of that. And it's easy to get really lost in that, even though it's also archetypally necessary on some level. But it's easy to get lost on it and to forget, how does the heart feel? So anyway, to the detriment of Mercury, Jupiter enters Pisces and says, look, I'm going more on feeling. I'm going more on hope. Jupiter in Pisces encourages. The etymology of the word encourage, the word, when you get the core in there, that little piece of the language points to the heart, right? So encouragement, it means it's sort of like enlivening the heart. When you talk about enthusiasm and theos, the God inside, like encouragement and enthusiasm, those are qualities that Jupiter and Pisces wants to bring back into our lives, into the structures of our lives that are meant to give us unity, that are meant to give us, if the last two signs are like that song from REM, Losing My Religion, then Jupiter and Pisces is like, no, I'm coming back to my religion. I'm coming back to my faith. The easiest way to define faith is the way in which your beliefs are motivated into action. You can't really have beliefs unless you're acting upon them, right? You can't act upon beliefs unless you are moved by them emotionally and inspired by them emotionally. And there's going to be a lot of that. And not only that, but a lot of evaluating of beliefs that don't pass the emotional test. And all of that may come at times at the detriment of Mercury. Like, wait, I have the perfect argument here. I have all of the rhetoric on board, but somehow it doesn't feel right to me. So Venusian things are getting prioritized, you could say, over Mercurial things while Jupiter is in Pisces. On the other hand, you could say that Jupiter, to the detriment of Pisces, could very well increase a kind of emotional fanaticism. So that's the dangerous part about Jupiter and Pisces, is that in the detriment of Mercury, you could very well see, I really have more hope and faith that the goodness of this placement will amplify the need for encouragement, enthusiasm, inspiration, that those things need to make a reappearance in our lives right now, that we need to become believers, true believers again on some level, that are and that looks different for every person, but I feel like that's the best of this, and that's really where I'm hanging my hat on this transit. But the downside is, well, look, if a person hasn't been rational to, it's just that saying, don't try to use reason to talk someone out of a position that they didn't use reason to get into. Well, if people are entrenched in positions that are not very thoughtful, that are not incredibly well reasoned or thought out, if they haven't asked important questions, if they haven't had their faith tested in any way, then Jupiter in Pisces in some ways will get people doubling down on a kind of religious and emotional zeal about whatever their convictions are. So that's the danger of that transit. Mercury's in its detriment and fall in Pisces. So a degree of irrational fervor or zeal for things might be the price tag of the transit. But I suspect that what we will see overwhelmingly in our lives personally and collectively will be some really positive resurgences of good faith, of forgiveness, of grace. One of the tests, if you really deeply believe that something is true, eternally valuable for your life, the virtues or um, adornments of spiritual life, that people like the Buddha or Jesus exude, or it's like if you really believe that those things are valuable and that they are worth embodying, what comes along with it is a very deep feeling of security in the appropriateness of those values in your life. And if you feel really emotionally convicted about those values, you become a much more humble, forgiving, compassionate, peaceful person. One of the quickest ways to tell that someone hasn't really deeply taken those beliefs into their life is if they aren't kind. If they're saying things that, it's like, well, it sounds good on paper and your beliefs or your views sound good, but you feel like just a really angry person to me, or you feel like a really frustrated, judgmental person to me. Um, well, I mean, in a way, that's each of us. Whenever we notice those qualities in ourselves, if we're being honest, it's like, well, I'm not passing some of the emotional tests of my faith, which can be a call for us to become more sincere and to try to grow and make it more real. And I think, we have to be patient with ourselves, because we all on some level are sort of hypocrites, and we have to do that. But I guess my simple point is that, you know, if people's emotional zeal for what they believe in is rising and becoming more intense, but they're not becoming more peaceful, patient, kind, tolerant, compassionate, forgiving, and merciful, then it's just bogus. And we should apply that test to ourselves, first and foremost. These are the kinds of things that Jupiter and Pisces will give us a lot of insight about. Now, another thing that's, I think, really profound about Jupiter in Pisces is that it's a very, very fertile placement. So water signs make things grow, and Jupiter makes things grow. So when you have Jupiter moving into this very fertile water sign of Pisces, whatever whole sign house it touches in your life, you're going to see things proliferate and grow. I will not be surprised to see a lot of pregnancies in my practice. I will not be surprised to see businesses flourishing, for there to be an economic uptick in the next year. It's going to be there in 2022 as well. We're just getting it now from mid-May through late July, but next year we get it for a good portion of the year, back and forth too. We're going to see the rain coming down and the crops growing. Now that could be totally mundane and totally materialistic. Jupiter will make things grow, and it doesn't, it will do so in the lives of, a selfish, vain investor on Wall Street as much as it might do it in the life of someone who's trying to grow a garden in their backyard or something. You know what I mean? So it's rain falls everywhere, right? So the Jupiter in Pisces blessing, though, may be that you're really going to see a fertile new developmental period happening, where there's, like, let's say if it's coming into your career house, you're going to see a lot of growth and change and development, and there's kind of a fertile energy coming into that area of your life. If it's in your 11th house, community, friends, groups, your relationship house, growth for your partner or growth for a relationship, meeting someone new, spiritual growth in a relationship, a mentor or guru entering your life. Maybe it enters the 9th house, you're going back to school, your imagination and mind is just totally, growing with new things. So watch for that sense of, it's a spring sign, basically. It's on the cusp of spring. Venus is proliferating here. So you're going to see things grow. The main thing, of course, the downside is, it's kind of that proverbial don't go to the grocery store on an empty stomach. You want to be really careful that you don't spend too much, eat too much, go overboard with the desire for the kind of the spring craze. And, I was just watching, actually, like 2 days ago, I was watching this, watching the movie Bambi with my daughters. And that movie's like intense for, by the way, if you guys have seen Bambi for a while. But I was like, wow, this movie's really intense. And there's this, I think the word that's used at some point is Twitter-pated. It was like springtime, and all the animals are basically like horny. You know, they're all trying to find a partner. And there's this really cute scene where they're all like, you know, just kind of going crazy in love. And I was just thinking, God, you know, that's Jupiter and Pisces. Here it comes. There's going to be this just this proliferation, this growth of that kind of Twitter-pated energy. Of course, my daughter, when she was my 5-year-old, who was starting to like grok it a little bit more, she stuffed her head under a cushion, under a pillow. Don't look at me. I was like, oh man. She came back. Oh, this is the funniest thing. So she came back from preschool the other day, and there was a boy at her preschool, and the teacher said, you know, ask her about so and so today. She made him a piece of art. So she had made some little boy in her preschool piece of art that said, "I love you." She's so it was so innocent, you know, and and my wife goes, so well, what do you love about him? And she goes, well, he has these beautiful brown eyes and this long brown hair. And she says, and she pauses, she goes, oh, Krishna. I just about died. Oh my God, it was so funny. Oh, Krishna. So, oh my God. And anyway, so you might be about to go into a mode where, you know, you're Twitter-pated and you're like, oh, Krishna. The Jupiter in Pisces will just really amplify that fertile spring romantic, you know, energy. And like, I hope it's really healing for everyone. I hope that wherever it touches your life, I hope that it's something that brings a lot of healing, because I think we need it. As much as I love Jupiter and Aquarius, and I'm not trying to hate on it today, but I'm trying to offer a stark contrast so that we can get excited about Jupiter and Pisces, which is just to say that, like, look, you know, Jupiter in Aquarius is like heavy. It's like being in a warehouse full of like big ideological cubes, and you have a forklift and you're like moving them around trying to, you know, fit all of these ideological puzzles in your head into place. And there's this, it's noble and it's lofty and it all feels very important, but a lot of it just totally misses the eye and heart test. And so we need that balance, right? So we'll see what it's like. We're going to get a good taste of it between May and July. And I hope that this helped you get some good thoughts about it. Okay. So as promised, I'm going to move into some personal Q&A. It's funny to me that, you know, I get these personal questions from people. I would never think people would be interested in this, but I just thought, you know, maybe they're, you know, I said, I kicked out. I was like, there were certain questions here where I was like, no, definitely not answering that. But, you know, people had really fun questions for me over time. And so I aggregated all of them and just thought I'd do this episode. So who are your best, and if you have other questions for me that is, you know, that are like things you want to know about me, feel free to put them in the chat box. I'll try to answer them. So I'm just going to run through these kind of quickly. Who are your best astro buddies? Who are you on the same wavelength with when it comes to your approach to Hellenistic astrology? Well, that's funny because in the larger astrological industry, I would consider myself to have a lot of friends from a lot of different schools and traditions, even though philosophically I may sort of go toe to toe, or, you know, I think like there's a competitiveness and a natural kind of turf war that happens between different schools and philosophies in astrology. And I feel like I try to hold that tension while also having friendships like across the board. So like I have friends that are evolutionary astrologers and I'm like, yeah, I think your philosophy is garbage. I think you're a beautiful person. You know, like how do I'm just kidding about garbage, but you see what I mean? Like, I don't like your philosophy, but I really like you as a person. I feel like I have that relationship with schools that I may not necessarily agree with, and individual practitioners, like all around the field of astrology. I really love people. I just have, you know, committed set of beliefs and, you know, principles that I work with as an astrologer. So yeah, I don't know. Like I just feel like I have friends like all across. The other thing about the astrological industry is that you don't see each other a lot. Like I might see my colleagues like once a year at a conference or something like that. Otherwise it's like online. So a lot of the friendships that I have in the astrological world have been primarily like online relationships. And then you get together in person, and there's so many people at a conference that you want to see and spend time with. And so I'll end up kind of making the rounds. And like every conference, I feel like I'm spending a little bit of time with different people that I've wanted to get to know a little bit better. So it's kind of been a scattershot, like I feel obviously like my Hellenistic, the people that I like, whose work I like and I naturally jive with, or be like the people that I've had in my speaker series, from Kelly Surtees, Dimitri George, Chris Brennan, Austin Coppa, like just your usual suspects, in the Hellenistic world, that, I like all of these people and I like their work and so forth, even though I know I am also different from them in different ways. I don't have particularly close friendships with any of my colleagues in the Hellenistic world. But I have like a kind of a mutual admiration and respect, I guess you could say. At least I hope it's mutual. I assume it is. We end up seeing each other and hanging out for dinner at conferences here and there. And so, yeah, but, there's like in the Hellenistic world, the people that I've been closest to have been my teachers and not necessarily my colleagues, like my peers. So like Robert Schmidt for me, has had more personal closeness and impact on my life than, any of my colleagues who, I've had probably more personal time with. So that's kind of it's a weird thing. Robert Schmidt is one of them. One of my horary teachers, Chris King, and like, let's see, Rebecca Gordon. She was my very first astrology teacher and is probably one of my dearest friends in the astrological community. Like, I actually, she moved and then she was still subletting her apartment. So I like lived in her old apartment for a while in New York, and, was one of her students, and I've had her speak many times. I almost always go out for dinner with her at conferences with my other friends. John Oliver, he's a psychic, and he owns a bookshop in Richmond, Virginia. And he's like, I would consider him like a closer friend. He has an employee named Nick that I'm also friends with. I can't remember his last name, but he's an astrologer too. So those are my best astrological friend is my friend Tom, who's just like he's not like he doesn't have like a public astrology practice, but he consults with people privately, and he's from Hong Kong. He's a yoga studio owner from Hong Kong, and also a devotee of he's a bhakta. So he and I met at a NORWAC conference in Seattle, and he's like, oh, I talked to him, late hours, in the evening, early hours, his time in Hong Kong. We talk astrology, bhakti, and life, like probably 3 or 4 times a month for 3-4 hours at a time. So he's probably like my best astrological friend. So yeah, and then there's tons of other people, like, I just about wet the bed when Stephen Forrest sat in the front row of one of my lectures one time and gotten several readings from him. And though I sometimes feel like his like the evolutionary philosophy is something I've departed from, I consider him like one of my favorite elders and mentors in the field. And yeah, there's lots of other people too that have meant a lot. I couldn't possibly name all of them, but yeah. Okay, anyway, what concept of traditional astrology is most fascinating to you at the moment? What concept? Well, right now for me, I've been working for several years trying to define or distinguish the difference between domicile rulerships and exaltation rulerships. That plays a really big role in one of the experimental lectures that I give in my courses right now, really hashing out, like fleshing out what is the difference between a domicile ruler and an exaltation ruler? What do they do? How are they different? How were they conceptualized philosophically? That's something that I'm really interested in at the moment. Most rewarding or challenging natal placement, Mars and Gemini for sure. I have always had the gift of gab, talking, articulating, kind of an incisive, analytical, mental quality. But yeah, I have a sharp tongue. It just slips out at times, and I feel often like ashamed of it. I can't get it under control. It's like a very explosive it can be very mentally sharp, and it can be towards myself or towards people around me. Like sometimes I'm just sharp tongued, and I feel like that's like my greatest nemesis. Yoga's helped me tremendously with that, but like that's probably, one of my more challenging placements. Maybe, people, it's funny. People always think that, they always think, well, it must be your Capricorn moon. And actually, I feel like my Capricorn moon has been one of the most deep and meaningful parts of my chart that I have a really good relationship with. But my Mars in Gemini is one that I struggle. How would your best friend describe your personality? Devoted. That would be for sure. I think that probably one of the words that I have a couple best friends, but probably my number one best friend, his name's Nick. I think he would describe me as someone who's devoted, maybe to the point at times of being like a little obsessive. Like I'm someone who puts a lot of care and consistency into the things that I love and do. I'm really like consistent with my practices, my studies, my professional life, my relationships. I'm very attentive and devoted to them. Always room for more. I don't always feel very devoted to them, but I know that he's said that to me before. And he's also told me that, sometimes I have to like let go a little bit more. It can be a little obsessive. I think, but like I think he would also say that I have like a really dry and probably kind of fly under the radar sense of humor that people wouldn't always see in me right away. Like that sometimes people, they meet me and they think like kind of astute or disciplined or serious, or like kind of mature Saturnine qualities, or they might feel like I'm like a mental rational qualities. But when you get me like outside of the context of like my professional work and you're just hanging out with me, like I'm a lot looser and funnier. And that comes out more now that I have a YouTube channel than ever, because yeah, for whatever reason on video, I tend to let loose a little bit more. So it comes out sometimes. Do you get in trouble for your sense of humor? Oh, that's an interesting question. I hadn't looked at all of these. I had some help aggregating them, and I didn't actually read all of them. Do you get in trouble for your sense of humor? Yeah, I've gotten in trouble for my sense of humor. It always kind of sucks when I do, because I don't really think I'm a mean person. Like I feel like predominantly like I'm a really caring person, but yeah, I mean, like sometimes I just have a really dry, sometimes sort of cynical or sarcastic wit. And I just find the absurdities of life so worth laughing at. And I'm so game for laughing at my own and like, calling myself out and having fun with it. And so it's kind of unimaginable to me that other people aren't. One of the things that, as much as I feel like I drank ayahuasca for 10 years, I'm very interested in processing trauma, grief, looking for alternative and intelligent ways of healing ourselves from the wounds inflicted upon us, from just poor ways of living. And I'm into healing. Generally speaking, I wouldn't do all of this if I wasn't. But for example, being in the sort of new age healing, yoga, astrology industry for so long, like I also have seen a lot of like, they might as well be SNL skits of people who are so like absurdly buried in self-pity and like narcissistic victimization. And I try to, like, sometimes I feel like we need to make light of it and just have a little bit of fun with it. Like everyone needs their thunder jacket. We're all just so freaking sensitive. At the same time that everyone's so sensitive and has their thunder jacket on, they need to feel like they're a level 10 healer who's the most powerful being in creation. I feel like when I see those kinds of paradoxes, like I laugh. I just think they're funny. And I think they're funny in the most harmless way. Like I'm not wanting anyone to be damned to hell for them. I don't lack any compassion for that situation, because I can recognize how I've been in that situation myself. Oh, I'm such a strong, evolved, mature astrologer. And yet, like I'm also like really overly sensitive. And sometimes, I just need to grow, just grow a thicker skin a little bit sometimes. So I feel like some of those absurdities, if you can't laugh at them, those are the ones that I tend to get in trouble for. It's when it's always like, and the thing is too, is that we're the people who are into healing and, kind of broad-minded, eclectic topics, so willing to eat our own. the people who are into spiritual life, so willing to eat our own. And I find that to be, also like this feeling like humor and satire are like partly a way in which like cosmic justice is like administered too. Like some things just don't pass the eye or heart test, no matter how virtuous they look. And there's a lot of self-righteousness out there. And if I can't have a sense of humor about it, I think humor is the way that kind of stuff is held accountable. I think humor, satire, comedy, absurdity, self-effacement, I think that's how you hold those things to task in a way that is still inclusive. It's still like, hey, we're all part of the same team here, but like, come on, this is just ridiculous. So that's how I feel about it. So that gets me into trouble, my sense of humor sometimes. But anyway, how did you meet your wait a sec. How do you show appreciation to your wife? How do you show your appreciation to your wife? There's just so many different ways, I feel like, in a relationship over so many years that you show appreciation. I think the number one thing that I've learned with my wife in particular, who's a double Taurus Cancer rising, is that appreciation, we all have a love language. You guys have probably read that book where there's certain things that obviously my wife likes to know she's appreciated. But I think it's daily things. It's small things and it's daily things. It's lending a hand in a situation that I can tell she's getting overwhelmed by. It's saying, hey, why don't you go take a walk? I'll take the kids. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's like small, everyday kind of constant watering of her and her life and her needs in the small ways. Like, it's not the grand big stuff, it's the small stuff. And she's really taught me that. She's taught me how to be attentive to her needs by telling me it's the small stuff, and not necessarily that I have some great aptitude for knowing what people need or want. But I think Cancer, if I Cancer Sun and Mercury in my chart, if there's one thing that maybe Cancers are good at, it's being able to sense if someone isn't getting their needs met, and then trying to figure out what to do, what one could do to nurture or help or whatever. So yeah, I'm like, it could be a million different things though. I mean, it might be like the other day my wife was unpacking some stuff, and I had a busy day too. So she was going to go pick up my daughter from preschool, and I just said, "Oh, I'll go get her. You keep doing that stuff." And she just stopped and put down the box and looked at me, and almost started crying and was like, "Thank you." It's just, I think it's stuff like that. Really, in relationships, that's what I like the most too, in terms of getting appreciation. It's just small stuff. It's kind of staying attentive to the moment and to the space you're in, and not getting too outside of it. If you can be attentive and caring in that space of this moment, this situation, this hour of our evening, then I think that you can string together some victories, and they tend to lead to a feeling of being really deeply loved over time. Anyway, not that I'm a relationship guru or anything. So do you have any further plans blending your passion for astrology and herbalism with your wife? Yes, we do. But the reality of it has been, every year that we've been ambitious about getting it started, like, the kids, it's like 2 kids and me doing this work and my wife doing her herbal work, and then trying to create more space for that outside of the space that we already need to just care for our relationship. It's like, that's just really tough to do. So we're just prioritizing raising kids, doing our individual work, and prioritizing our relationship at the moment, in our bhakti, our spiritual lives and community. And the hope is that in time, naturally, as the kids get a little bit more independent, that more space will open up for that. But yeah, it's just hard because it's something we both, when we started off, in our early 30s, like 2, starry-eyed, kids who just started a yoga studio out of a house, and then it gradually developed and built, and it grew into this big community. And that has been it's been like the impulse to create things together has been there, and we just didn't know what a powerful thing it was to create babies together, because that's like a whole nother level of I honestly think we were a little naive. I think we were like, oh, they're just going to be like accessories to our careers and our creative life as a couple, which was very, very yoked together. Like worked in the same office, worked out of a studio together. Like, then kids came along and it was like, whoa, like, okay, we did not know what we were getting into. Revealed a lot of selfishness within both of us, helped us grow up. I couldn't have asked for something better for the two of us, but it has forced us to put on hold more of the creative professional aspirations that we've had as a couple. Let's see. I recently finished your remarkable book, but noticed that the subject of astrology was totally absent. Was this deliberate or request from your editor? So Fishers of Men, The Gospel of an Ayahuasca Vision Quest was written before I was a professional astrologer. That's the only reason that it wasn't included in the book. Also, any plans to write another book? And if so, what would it be about? Yes, for sure. And it will, I already know what it'll be about. It'll be about astrology, but more specifically, it will be storytelling. It will not be a technical book. It will not be a manual of delineation or techniques or history or anything like that. Maybe at some point I'll write something like that. But the book that I really want to write next, that again, like my wife and I, like, it's just something I'm waiting on until space opens up in my life. And I know it will. And this is also not about me. Like, I don't need to write a book. God doesn't need another book from Achyuta Baba, or whatever. Like, I don't take that view that I have something so important to say. I just like writing, and I feel that there's something that I feel inspired to write about, which I take as a sign that maybe Krishna has something that, wants to come through me, so to speak. But I don't know, we'll see. But the one that I feel like I have inside of me is a collection of essays and stories about the practice of astrology and the life of an astrologer and the spiritual, the spiritual path of astrology, which, as you guys know, is something I kind of blend into everything that I do. I recently, oh wait, no, that one. Here we go. How did you know your wife was the one? Did you use synastry? So this is really funny. My wife came into my life because I did an astrology reading for her. I was going through a breakup, and my girlfriend at the time, who I had been engaged to, so we were breaking off an engagement, and she was moving out, and I was just at the start of my professional practice, and I was pretty sick. And I did a reading for my wife over the phone. I couldn't see her face. I could just hear her voice. And the double Taurus Cancer rising with the Aries stellium that she has in her 10th house, to me, was like, it was really silly, because it's so like, if you're an astrologer, only an astrologer can get this joke. But when I saw it and I heard her talking and I was like getting a feel for her, I was like, oh my God, she's so hot. I was like, really, like, I liked her so much. And I was like, I hope physically I'm attracted to her. Cause if so, I'm definitely going to, I'm going to put, throw my hat in the ring and be like, hey, do you want to go out? And then I connected with her after the reading on Facebook, which in the reading I kept professional, except for one thing, which my wife always teases me about, which was like at the end of the reading, and she was saying how pleasant it was and what a nice reading it was, and she liked it and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, you have a beautiful chart. And so I was like, oh man, I got the phone and I was like, that is so unprofessional, because it was totally like a flirt. I said it in a really flirtatious way. So anyway, then I connected with her on Facebook, and I was like, oh, she's from Minnesota, which is where I'm from. And she's totally Minnesotan, like down to the bone. And she's really hot. I like her, and she's really just super beautiful personality. And not only that, but then she, at the end of the reading, was like, you're really sick. Because I had a cold, I had a bad cold that I was dealing with. And she was like, she's an herbalist, right? And a yoga teacher. So she was like, well, why don't I send you some herbs? And I was like, no, I should pay for your time. And she's like, no, you're not going to take them or take the time, because you're working so much. And like, I'm giving you herbs. And just the way that she kind of like took over and pushed me around and just made me take some of her medicine. Oh, so it was so attractive to me. I was like, yeah, you just tell me what to do. you tell me, I'll do it. So that's how I felt. And I didn't really look at the synastry. Like, I'm not really a big synastry person in general. I think it's kind of overrated. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying, like, looking at the two charts and being like, oh my God, is she right? I was like double Taurus, Cancer rising, you know, I've got my Venus in Leo. She has her Venus in Aries. So there was just like a fiery kind of Venus connection between us. And then of course I'm Capricorn moon and Cancer sun. And Taurus rising. She's Cancer rising with Taurus moon and sun. So there was, like, really good synastry between us, just in the feel of our talking to each other. And I didn't really need anything more than that. But yeah, so yeah, that's how I knew I knew that she was the one. Really, I think when she came back for another reading, like within a month or two, she came back for another reading, and then she invited me to come and teach astrology at a yoga retreat that she was leading in West Virginia. And so I went and did that. And when I met her at the retreat, it was like, you know what that chemistry is like. It was just like neither of us could hide the kind of overwhelming attraction that we felt for each other, and just wanting to be around each other, but also not wanting to make it look like we wanted to be around each other to a group of people that we were teaching and leading for the weekend at this retreat center. And I had originally asked her out, and she had said no. And then we were at the retreat, and at the end of the retreat, she came up to me and she said, "Would you still want to go out?" And I told her no. I was like, no. And she was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I thought you would." And I was like, "No, I mean, you had a chance, and like I've moved on, It's like I don't want to be someone's I don't want to be someone's like, I don't want to have to feel like I had to convince someone, And that's how I felt at the time. And it was just my pride, And she later on, it was funny, like later on in the summer, like 3 months later after I said no to her, she sent me this random text message, and she was like, the gist of the text message was, "Will you reconsider, please? Can we go out?" And I was like, "All right, yeah, let's go out." And and then when we went out, that was it. Like, literally, we went out, and then within a week we were cooking up plans to start a yoga studio together. How crazy is that? So yeah, so then that's it. That's the history. So okay, let's see. Um uh what was the most rocking, scary prediction that you have done and it came to pass? Ooh, yeah. Um I one time predicted I don't predict death, but I predicted that a man's wife was going to have a really serious health episode, most likely a mental health episode, um, within a particular month of a particular year, and she ended up taking her life that month and that year. And he contacted me, thanked me. Uh, you know, I think probably became a much bigger believer in astrology at that point, and that one always kind of haunted me because it just just looked like a really bad transit. And I just thought, oh, so that's probably the scariest one that I've ever done. There's so many though over 10 years. It's like hard to say. And I much prefer to much prefer to talk about the ones that I got right that were pleasant, obviously. But anyway, would you advise anyone to abstain from ayahuasca or wait and prepare it in a certain way? I mean, you need to make sure you're not on certain kinds of medications, and you have to make sure that you have a really good support network in place, especially if you have a history of mental health problems. Um, I like any kind of psychedelic medicine can be very helpful, but it can also trigger and amplify things that aren't necessarily wanted or desired, and it's not always easy to know which is which. I think by and large, if people prepare in the right way, cleanse their bodies in the right way, go to the right place, go make sure they have the medical background check and stuff like that a lot of these centers require, mostly it's going to be safe and it's going to be fine. And I don't think you just do it when you feel called to do it and prepare in the right way and follow the correct procedures. But you know, there's also this kind of wild card element, and I'm always somewhat uncomfortable to tell who should or who shouldn't. I kind of just like want to steer clear of that because I don't want that karma on me. Just being selfish, but you know, um, yeah, I feel like there's no reason to do ayahuasca just to do it. Like I think you should feel called to take on something like that, and you should know, your own background, and you should know what kind of life you have in place to come home to. I had a really incredible support system, not that it was perfect, but coming home from drinking ayahuasca, which was helpful. People who come back from drinking ayahuasca and they have really poor living conditions, poor health conditions, poor support network, really rocky relationships, that might not be the best setting in which to bring those insights and realizations back initially. You might want to be careful that your life can support you. At the same time, the ayahuasca will transform and encourage anyone to change the support structure of their life in ways that are needed. So it's kind of a hard thing to balance out. As a monk, are you hoping to have a sanctuary? That's interesting. No, I'm like, well, okay, I should say this. One of our long-term goals in the next, say, 10 years would be to build not a massive operation or anything, but basically the equivalent of a retreat center, probably up here in northern Minnesota, where people can come. We can have, bonfires and be in nature and be on the water on a lake and have something like a teaching hall, like a building that can be used to teach astrology and teach herbal medicine, have our herbal medicine garden there, and like a temple altar space for bhakti. It's kind of bhakti, herbs, and astrology space where we can host maybe gatherings of, say, 50 people, once a year or something like that. I'd really like to do. That's a dream of mine. So if that's a sanctuary, then I guess maybe that counts. How did you come to your spiritual name? Well, my guru gave it to me. I didn't choose it. He gave it to me, and that's part of initiation in the Bhakti yoga tradition. So yeah. Why do you use different names? Well, I don't. I go by Achutabhava now exclusively. I mean, at times, if I'm talking to, I don't know, the people installing the cable box or the internet or something, I go by, my billing name. Obviously, I'll just go by Adam, because one of the things that's really challenging sometimes is, you go into some setting and you're like, okay, what's your name? And they're, you're buying something at a store and you're like, my name is Achutabhava. And then it's like a 10-minute conversation that unfolds at that point. And I have to like steward people through their little discovery process of, religious diversity or whatever. I'm like, no, I just want to, I just want to, get my oil changed and go home, please. so, like, yeah, I sometimes use my different names just because it's I use my given name because it's convenient, and I don't feel like, it's just like I'm a public person doing this all the time. And every single day of my life, I get shitty people saying shitty things to me that are really hurtful on social media. And you get, of course, people that are really like loving what you're doing. And it's hard to just like step out of that and not think of yourself in terms of what other people think about you, whether it's good or bad, and to just be like a normal person, and to like just kind of check out of this whole like reality of the YouTube and astrology and whatever public persona. When I do that, it's just like I don't have the energy sometimes to like, deal with people trying to figure, it's like when people encounter yoga in your name, or when they encounter that you're an astrologer or whatever, like they have to have like, they suddenly are faced with reality. Like, you're an astrologer. Like, what does that mean? Is astrology real? Am I real? Like, it's like, I just don't feel like, I want to be on all the time like that. So sometimes I hide that I'm an astrologer and I tell people I'm a yoga studio owner. Sometimes I say my name is Adam and it's Achuta, because I just don't always feel like dealing with it. But that's usually just in public. And I don't use different names on this channel. I go in most areas of my life, I go by Achuta. You may have watched older videos of mine where I introduce myself as Adam. When did you realize that there was something very real about astrology? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, yeah, this is an easy one. And I've told this story before, but I was in an ayahuasca ceremony, and the moon was coming into the mesa, and I had spilled a cup of water and my arm was like soaking in the water and I didn't realize it because I was just in in another dimension. And I started seeing this tapestry of lunar goddess symbolism, and some of what I saw was also the crab. And I realized, oh, I'm a Cancer sun. It was like the first time in probably a decade or more that I had even thought about what my astrological sun sign was. And it was this realization that I'm a Cancer. And then it was this just mind bending realization that about what that actually means, and that it was this archetypal imagery and symbolism that somehow embodied part of my behavior and psychology. And it was so beautiful and so, I mean, that's what turned me on to astrology, was that vision. That was the very first one. I didn't start actively even studying astrology until like a year after that. But that was the first vision that I had where I was like, there is something to this. That there is, and there is. It's like Terrence McKenna says, this reality is stranger than you can possibly imagine. That's how I felt. I felt like astrology was real. But yeah, as soon as I started studying and actually practicing it with charts, it took like 2 seconds for me to, I mean, didn't take long at all to be like, wow, this really works. Like this is amazing. So yeah, every single day, I feel like it's the first day too, in that regard. Are you a veg or vegan? If so, why? I'm a vegetarian. I have been a vegan in the past. I'm a vegetarian because in the Bhakti tradition, we use like ethically sourced, dairy ingredients like ghee and sometimes milk. But these in the Bhakti tradition, you also have to understand that cows are like revered. So they're the relation. It's not like factory farming. We're talking about the use of um, you know cow products as a sacred part of the religion. So there's some of that. I also don't really have a problem with like ethically sourced. I don't have a problem with people who ethically, source eggs or something like that. And here's the thing. Here's my thing about vegetarianism and veganism, and also sum it up. And I don't want to sound judgmental, but since people ask, I'll just tell you what I really feel about it. And I feel like one of the most basic ethical ways that we could change the world and make it a better place has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with, changing systems and structures of government and, lawmaking. And I honestly feel like it's as simple as recognizing that animals are living beings and that they're souls, and that if we have all of this virtue that we're so excited about in human life, but murder animals and crush the environment, that we're raging hypocrites. So for me, like vegetarianism, and I'm not like, it's not black and white for me. I know that because plants are alive. Even the Shastras tell us this, and my spiritual teachers make a point of it. We're not in Bhakti. We don't even really consider ourselves vegetarians. We consider ourselves like people who try to do minimal, or pacifists who try to do a minimal amount of harm, knowing that doing harm is inevitable part of the material world. You're killing plants when you eat them, and if you don't think plants have souls, then you're just as bad as someone who doesn't think animals have souls. So like I've never really bought the vegan principle that you're not killing life or taking animal life when you take plants. Like I just think that's bad logic. But I do think I have a lot of my friends are vegans, so I've had, it's like not a personal thing, but to me, I feel like the easiest way to make the world a better place is to try to minimize the amount of harm that we're doing, try to eat in the most sattvic and peaceful ways possible. And if people have ethical ways of, ethical, conscientious ways about taking life, whether it's plant life or even in some cases animal life. Like I have hunters in my family who are very ethical, and when they hunt, they use every part of the animal, and they only do so once a year. And something like that. I mean, I don't go around judging people really, but I do think that like one of the biggest problems in our world actually is the hypocrisy of trying to do good or be good or create good in the world when it's really coming while we're stomping our heels on other beings. So that's one of the main reasons that I'm a vegetarian, is because I'm trying my best to minimize that kind of relationship with the world that I have. And I'm not perfect at it. And there's inconsistencies. I'm not trying to be puritanical or judge anyone, but that's like how I feel about it. And again, like, I also think that if you're someone out there who's like, um, I'll just to put it very bluntly, if you're someone out there who's advocating for the rights of any group whatsoever, from any part of the world, any race, any gender, any area whatsoever, and you're advocating for their rights because you believe that they're suppressed, but you have no problem eating a steak, there's something seriously wrong with you, in my opinion. Now that's my most judgmental like inner thought about it, right? But like that's where I'm coming from. So I and that doesn't mean that I well, let me just switch my view here. Yeah, so that's where I stand on it. I just feel like one of the easiest and most basic ways that we can try to embody and actually walk our talk when it comes to the dignity of other beings is to eat vegetarian, or eat mostly vegetarian, even just eating mostly plants, like mostly just have a good portion of like a plant-based diet on your plate. I think that goes a huge way to becoming a better, cleaner earth. So that's me. But I'm really careful though, because with food, it's like, yeah, I just keep coming back to like not being judgmental about it. One of the main reasons that I stopped being a vegan was because I felt that it was amplifying within me a spirit of judgment. It was too puritanical for me, and also sort of hypocritical in different ways. But no offense to my vegan friends out there. I support you guys. But yeah, so that's my vegan vegetarian story. All right. I think that's it on the list. Someone asked me about how ayahuasca and astrology link up. I just covered that. So I think that's it. I'm going to turn now to the YouTube comment box and see if you guys have any other questions. So if you guys have any other questions for me, I'm happy to take them now. I probably won't do one of these for a while because it's a little bit more uncomfortable for me to talk about myself. But if you guys have any other questions for me, I will answer them before we go. Having Mars Gemini, do you have any other Gemini, Virgo, or other strong 6th, 3rd house placements? I ask because, yes, you speak a lot, but also with clear, detailed articulation. No, I just have Mars in Gemini, nothing in Virgo. Let's see. What steps did you take to build your astrology business in the beginning or your career? Oh man, I just made it up as I went. I'm serious. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I built a website on my own through what was that place called? Weebly. I built a Weebly website, and I had a platform because I had written a book about ayahuasca. So I had like a public space, and I was writing for Reality Sandwich all the time, and I was speaking a lot and had engagements about ayahuasca. So I started naturally talking about astrology in those places. And that started building me an online following for my blogging. And I started writing every single day about astrology because I first I wanted to, but then second, I also realized that creating content was a way of developing my career. And so, that was a part of it. And the challenge of coming up with new ways of relating to astrology every day was just, I was totally in love with that challenge. I really like that. Astrology is perfect for daily content creation because there's always something new happening. And the more that you relate to the astrology every day in new ways, and you're forced to do so because, we aren't creatures that like doing things in the exact same way over and over. We like the variety. So if you have to do something over and over again, but you're forced to find variety. Well, you grow. Especially as an astrologer, that's how you grow. You need to see different charts, different circumstances, different transits. You need to experience them. You need to write about them. You need to talk to other people about them. So I just was doing that literally every single day, and the audience was growing. And yeah, I guess I just got creative and innovative with how I did donation-based readings and classes, and just slowly building experience and trying things and failing and so forth. But I think the number one thing that if I had to recommend to anyone else, it would be like, in this day and age, it's find a way of getting that experience, and probably putting yourself out there in some way through a blog, or I mean that it's kind of cliched. I know not everyone feels that they want to have a YouTube channel or a some kind of public presence, but you have to do astrology like every day, and kind of people have to know that that's what you're doing for a while before it seems that clientele naturally start coming. That's my experience. This is okay. These are good ones. Now I'm liking these. Let's see. Personal questions, not astrological ones for today. Any books you recommend on ancient Vedic astrology and history? Not off the top of my head. Did it take a while to reintegrate Christianity as a faith you can work with, or did you always keep it with you? I've always kept it with me. It's never gone anywhere. It's just like now I see Jesus, Krishna, the Buddha. I see them all as, these cosmic spaceman avatars who are they're archetypal, they're emblematic of, and there's women too, obviously, like that have meant a lot to me in the Christian tradition. Teresa of Avila comes to mind, Mother Teresa in many ways. But yeah, there's just like the idea of saintly, exalted personalities, and great examples of compassionate people who have done the work and blazed the trail, and they don't go anywhere for me. And Jesus, like, how could I ever not have faith and love for Jesus? Like, it's Jesus, So that's how I feel. And like, I mean, when I was a kid, I was in praise bands. I was a youth pastor. I grew up being taught that loving others and loving God was the meaning of life. And like, that has not changed one bit for me since I was a little boy. So, not that I live up to it, but that's never changed for me. And I don't see Christianity. I of course, like everyone else, I find the faults and flaws and so forth with the religious institutional side of things. But when I read the teachings of Jesus and the encounters that I've had with Jesus as an archetypal figure in ayahuasca ceremonies and so forth, has only deepened and intensified my Christian faith. But it's also universalized it. Like, obviously, I don't see, like, when Jesus says, "I am the way," I don't think that that's exclusive to people approaching Krishna or people approaching another. Like, God takes many forms, in my opinion. So anyway, yeah. So no, it hasn't been really hard to reintegrate Christianity because it's always just been there. It's been more about how it's become more inclusive and how it's really become a universalized understanding of the Christian message. Yeah. How do you read Algol on your ascendant? Well, I mean, a good portion of my earlier life was spent completely losing my mind in psychedelics, drugs, and sex. So from like late teen years through mid 20s was like a huge amount of like drug, sex, and rock and roll, like really unhealthy. And so I don't think that Algol has to be in your life 24/7. But if someone has Algol on the ascendant or a powerful degree, it could be that there are portions or chapters of your life where, you're going to go completely bonkers with the desire body, which is often what that Eye of Medusa star is about. On the other hand, I have Chiron on that degree on the ascendant. And I think, like right now, my dog's a girl. I've got 2 girls, 2 and 5. My wife's a girl. My mom and my sister rely on me in many ways after my dad and my mom split. So and 90% 90% of my clientele and my viewership are women. So there's been a lot of that feminine energy in my life, and I think it's really been nice. It's really been a lot to say about learning how to embody that as a man or relate to it. And I think that's part of what Algol is about as well. But I don't know. It's it's like I'm more hesitant to comment on it in any conclusive way because I'm not even 40 yet. I turned 40 this summer, so who knows? We'll see. We'll see what else Algol has in store for me. What's your funniest Mars? What's your funniest Mars Gemini moment? Gosh, I can think of some that I will not share. But funniest Mars Gemini moment. I used to, as a kid, like I look back at this now and I think it's pretty hilarious that when I would get really pissed off at my dad, Mars is in my second house, in the house of like money and finances and resources and things like that. I would get really pissed off at my dad and I would steal the keys to the church after they were in bed and asleep. And I would sneak out my window and I would take my bicycle to the church with the keys. And I would go into the janitor's office, take the janitor's key to the pop machine. I don't know if you guys call it pop. That was what we call it here in Minnesota. Take the keys to the pop machine. I would open it up. I would fill a pillowcase with pop and pop cans, to take home, stash them. And then I would empty like a good amount of money into the pillowcase from the pop machine as well. And then I would take out the floor hockey equipment, drink soda in the basement of the church and play floor hockey by myself, and feel like a boss. So I just feel like that's like the funniest. Just how absurd that is. But yeah, so that's what I did. That's what I would do. And that always has reminded me of Mars and Gemini, just a mischievous little punk. So yeah, I think of that a lot. Let's see. Please do more sports speculation readings. Yeah, I'm a closet sports addict, basketball and football, and I often write in private where no one can see that I'm not so holy. I partake and then try to sometimes look at the charts of athletes that I like and stuff like that. Let's see. Oh my gosh, there's so many questions that came in. Thank you guys. These are all really nice. Okay, here. How much do you relate to your ascendant ruler, Achyuta? Venus? Yeah, Venus in Leo? A lot. That's probably more of my private side in some ways, is Venus in Leo, because it's in the fourth, so it's not like everyone really sees that part of me. Which is why I thought I would do this video, in fact, because I was like, I get these questions all the time and I'm always like, oh, I don't want to, so I thought, well, maybe I'll just share a little bit more about myself. Let's see. Do you think your kids will eventually follow in your footsteps and go into astrology? I would love it if they did. But I also am not like attached to it. We'll see. My daughter knows that I'm an astrologer, and one time we asked her what she wanted to do, and she said she wanted to be an herbalist and an astrologer like mommy and daddy, and we were like, well, we can set you up for that if so who knows though. We'll see. Who was your second astrology teacher and why? Use Chris Magnus, I should say. And I met him at an NCGR meeting. He asked if I would read his chart for him, and in exchange, he would do a horary reading for me. I loved the horary reading that he did so much that he became my horary teacher. And he ended up doing my wedding and baptizing my daughter. He's a Episcopal priest and an astrologer. Very not like a public, he's not publicly out there though with his astrology. So he still is very dear to me. Are you replacing any of your studio gear in your office rebuild or getting rid of anything? Oh yeah, it's totally new. Like I'm really excited about it. In this new studio space, there's a new color, new wall color. I um I got a convertible desk so it can be standing or seated because I work at my desk with readings and so forth like 5 to 6 hours a day usually at least. And so I have to I just need to be able to stand, and like even now the bench I'm sitting on sucks. So I've been standing and sitting and standing and sitting. And I'll probably continue to do that with this new office space. And then there's yeah, there's like a couple of concepts I'm working with, and until at least one of them is installed for shooting in the office, and my desk isn't even here yet. Until all of that's set up, I'll just be sitting here because I don't want to reveal my new office until it's set up. So that's I'm just particular about it, I guess. How do you deal with inaccurate readings if you've had any from egotistical professional place? Oh, it doesn't bother me at all. I've had to get really used to it because over the years, like, how could you get better at astrology? How could you possibly get better at it unless you were inaccurate and had to become more accurate? Like, it's just like basketball. It would be like saying, how do you deal with not being able to dribble a basketball? It's like, well, you just deal with it. If you want to learn how to dribble one, you got to figure it out. And at the beginning, you're not going to know how. So, and that's still true. Like to today, you're always learning as you go. So you just have to keep that kind of beginner's mindset, and then you get better at it as you go. I'm going to go through the last remaining questions and then we'll be done for the day. Thank you guys so much. This has been fun. Have I tried any other psychedelics? Yeah, lots of them. And they played an important role in my life for a little bit there. Not any longer now, but yeah, at one point I did. Have you ever noticed really good transits coming up and took a trip to Vegas? No, okay. The only story like that in my life is like this. So I was visiting a really good buddy of mine in Colorado, a friend from childhood, and there was a casino near his house. And he was like, "Do you want to go to the casino?" And he was like, "We could just go in with $50 or something, and just put a cap on it at $50 and play quarter, nickel, like whatever." Like, and I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be fun. Let's go." And one of the reasons that I said yes, let's go, is because Jupiter was exalted in Pisces and conjoining Mercury, in the ruler of my financial house. So I was like, yeah, let's go to the casino. And I shit you not, we got to the casino, nothing happened. I was down to $10 left. And I put $10, a $10 bill into a slot machine that was a $10 bill slot machine, and I won $800. And I've only been in a casino a couple times in my life. And that I was like, okay, astrology works, and I'll take my money and peace out. So I want, he was like, you have $800. He was like, you want to keep playing? And I was like, no, I do not. I want to take my Jupiter luckiness and I want to go home. And let's go out to dinner on the way home, and I'll treat. So that was it. That was the only time I've ever used astrology for, that kind of thing. Let's see. In your astrological opinion or prediction, do you see this social distance ending? It's kind of funny because I feel that the social distancing thing is actually a metaphor for something that's happening psychologically in our culture. And I feel like that part is probably only going to get worse. But the literal physical part, I think when Uranus, Saturn are done, duking it out, probably within a year from now, I would see it. Like maybe next spring. By that time, they'll be pretty far apart. I would imagine things will relax quite a bit within a year. At first, when I first was doing COVID stuff, like a lot of people, I didn't think it was going to be as long. I kind of thought by the very end of 2020, things would loosen up quite a bit as I was looking at what was happening around November, December, and the Great Conjunction. And I thought things are going to start to really loosen up by the end of the year. And I was right about that in a certain way, but also Uranus, Saturn coming right afterward, I wasn't really anticipating would still perpetuate a lot of the same dynamics. Yes, you missed the good news on Jupiter into Pisces. That was the first part of this video. So in my experience, most Christianity is of the father of lies. Wow, that's a big statement. Good luck with it. I went to see a guy who channeled Jesus in the room. And the room literally warmed up like the sun. That's beautiful. That's I hope that that's true. The government that crucified Jesus created the Christian religion. Yes, I'm sure you're on to something here. You should make a documentary about it. Post it on YouTube. We'll all watch. I avoid religions which encourage patriarchy. In other words, all of them. Oh God. I couldn't disagree with that more, but we won't get into that now. Let's keep going. Are you okay? I think that's it. I think we got through all of them. So I think we're at a good and I'm also starting to get snarky, so we should probably stop. Okay. Yeah, that's what I've got. All right. So thank you guys so much for making this a fun, just random Q&A day. I hope you guys got something good out of Jupiter and Pisces as well. I will be back tomorrow with wrap-up content for the week. We'll take a little bit of a look at Venus entering Gemini along with Mercury. So that's what's coming up. Remember, my new course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystics, starts in June. Go check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com, and go to the courses page, the first year course page in particular. If you have any questions about details in the course, happy to talk it over with you guys. I think I gave my email address already, so a few times. So, all right, have a great afternoon, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Bye.